No vacation PTO until October. Okay, I'm taking all of October off. Something happened at my husband's work last night that reminded me of this decade-old story. For context, at the time my husband worked overnights at one of the largest supermarket operators in North America. I was about 6 months pregnant, and the store he worked in had a change in who the store manager was, and when I went shopping I used either a wheelchair or a scooter with a cart on it due to a disability that makes it difficult for me to walk under normal circumstances. Background. Originally we had felt pretty lucky that between all the pregnancy tests I had done to confirm that yes, I am in fact pregnant, and the ultrasound the earliest, and the latest due date we had been given all fell in the first week of September. So my husband had planned to use one of his weeks of vacation that week, and then use his paternity leave after that week, so he would be able to be there while I was at the hospital in recovery, and for the first days of our baby's life. His boss seemed genuinely confused by the request. He was 22, single, and called his truck his baby, but had said something along the lines of, "Hey man, it's your vacation, you should use it how you want to." Then about a week later I came home from one of my doctor appointments to a message on the answering machine saying, "Unfortunately I have to deny your request for vacation and paternity leave in September, as someone with more seniority has put in for those days off as well. I hope this doesn't cause problems between you and your wife." I burst into tears on the spot, but my husband said he'd go talk to the person who requested those days off, explain that he asked for that time off because it's when the baby is due, and see if he could offer them something to give him those days off instead. Unfortunately, it was one of his coworkers who was going to have major surgery and needed that time off to recover, so we couldn't ask him to trade vacation weeks for us. My husband put in for time off for the second week off in September and is denied. Then he tries the third week and is denied again. But this time his boss tells him that he won't be able to use any of his vacation time until October due to his position and who has time off. Cue the malicious compliance. We realized that because this boss was new, he probably didn't realize that my husband had been saving all his vacation days, PTO and paternity leave. When we added up all the time it amounted to 3 weeks of time off. And if we worked it around to start around when his days off were, he would be able to be home with the baby from October 1st until November 9th. His coworkers on the night crew, and several of his friends on the morning crew felt that he had been seriously shafted by the new boss, so they got in on this plan with us. We waited until the boss day off, and that's when my husband put in the schedule for the time off he was requesting, which was approved by the scheduling manager and the night crew manager. This was in July, so the only thing left to do was wait. Our baby was born in the early hours of the morning, about 2 days before our earliest due date, after 29 hours of stage 2 and 3 labor. I ended up having an induction due to the fact I had been in early stage labor since the beginning of August, and it just wasn't progressing. When my husband called the night shift manager to say that I was going to the hospital to give birth, he told my husband to call in if he was going to miss any more days of work, and they would make sure it got covered. It wasn't PTO, but it was considered an excused absence. After I came home from the hospital, my mom started staying overnight with us temporarily to help out preparing meals, taking care of the dog, and the household chores, so I could focus on taking care of myself and the baby. That first month home was pretty rough, so I was relieved when October rolled around, and I finally had his help 24/7, and my mom was able to take a break. The aftermath. First up was the 3 days of paternity leave. On the morning of the 5th day of this 40-day-long vacation, the boss woke me up at 6 a.m. wanting to talk to my husband. I told him he was feeding the baby, and asked why he was calling. He said he was checking in to see why my husband no-showed the night before, and I said sarcastically, "Oh no, that's terrible. I'll go get him for you." I put the phone on speaker, so my husband can talk to his boss while he's feeding the baby, so I get to hear everything. The boss very smugly informed my husband that his paternity leave was over, and since he didn't come in the night before, he would be written up for a no-call, no-show. My husband said, "Yes, I know my paternity leave is over, but my first vacation week started last night." The boss, "First vacation week?" Husband, "Yeah, I have 3. I was going to use 1 in September, 1 in October, and 1 in November. But since you told me I couldn't use any PTO until October, I decided to just take all of October off to be with my wife and newborn." The boss, "I'll call you back after I look into this." I don't know how I managed to stay silent and not laugh at this conversation, but somehow I did. We got a call back later that day that went something like this. Boss. Yeah, I'm going to need you to come into work tonight. I never would have approved your request for time off if I knew you were taking the whole month off. Husband. You didn't approve of it. The night manager and scheduling manager both approved this, so I'm not coming in tonight. Boss. Clearly thinking this is a gotcha moment. I didn't approve it, and I need you to come in tonight. So you'll be here at 10 on your regular schedule for the rest of the month, or you'll be written up. Husband. No, I won't. I submitted the request in July, and you never denied my request. It's been approved by the other managers, and it's already started, so it's too late for you to deny it now. Boss. I'll call you back. After that, my husband called the union steward to confirm that he was in the clear, and they say that he is. We got another call the following Sunday, which was my husband's next day off, asking if he would be coming in that night, since he wasn't listed as being on vacation in the system. Husband. Am I on the schedule? Boss. No. Husband. Then it's my night off, so no. He hung up after that. But we got a call every night that my husband wasn't on the schedule, due to it being one of his regular days off, and him not being marked as being on vacation in the system. Some of the ladies in the bakery deli section of the store put together a card shower for us, and gave them gift cards, since we never said anything to them about when my baby shower was, or where we were registered. Later that week I made a trip into the store one afternoon to pick up some stuff, and introduced them to the baby, and my mom came along too. While we were over there, the store manager came up and said, "You must be husband's wife." I was feeling petty, so I pointed out that we would have met sooner, if he didn't have a habit of running away and hiding in his office when customers approached him. I don't know if that irritated him, or if he was planning on saying this next anyway, but the next words out of his mouth were, "You don't look like you need help with the baby." Husband said he was taking time off to help you with the baby, because you have a disability, but I guess you don't need it, huh? The bakery deli ladies glared at him, and my mom went pale because she knows I usually react very strongly to those comments. But my mom also raised me to be civil and mannerly, so I just smiled and said, "I hope you don't speak to your employees like that. That can get you fired. Bless your heart." And one of his employees told him I was right, so he sulked. He seemed so desperate to find any reason he could force my husband to come back to work before the end of the month. I started wondering if he was being petty, and might try to retaliate after my husband came back to work, or if he was just desperate. So I called one of my husband's coworkers. Remember when I said the new boss was 22? Well, he also had a habit of bragging about how he started working for the company as a cashier when he was 17, and worked his way up to management in just 5 years. At some point after the baby was born, district came and did a walkthrough, and it turned out his dad was the district manager, and he didn't work his way up to management. He was a Nepo baby that burned bridges with more than a few employees. Then, he turned up in a brand new truck and said with the year-end bonus he was going to get, he could pay it off in one go. Several employees walked, including 2 on the night crew. Since my husband was on paternity leave, he had to work overnights to make up the slack. He'd never showed up to cover overnights when they were short-handed before that. So we figured he was desperate to get my husband to come back, because working overnights was cutting into his dating time. Finally, the end of my husband's vacation time came, and his boss called again. "Boss, you used up your paternity leave in your vacation weeks. You're coming in tonight, right?" Husband. No, I still have PTO days left this year, and since I won't be able to use them all between November and the end of December, and they don't roll over into next year, I decided to take them now. Boss. Well, when are you coming back to work? Husband. November 10th. Boss called back the next day to tell my husband that actually he had used up his paternity leave while he was at the hospital giving birth, so he would have to use PTO to cover that. And actually he had used a week of PTO when he took me to the hospital with fake labor. So actually, he would be coming back to work on November 1st. My husband called the union steward and filed a complaint that his boss was retroactively deciding what counted as paternity leave and what counted as PTO, and trying to force him to use PTO days to cover days where he either went in late or left for a couple hours, and then came back and stayed late to make up the missed hours. He went in to fill out some paperwork, and we didn't hear from his boss again between then and when he got replaced at the end of the following January. Edit. To clarify some questions in the comments regarding FMLA, we didn't use it. This was us cashing in all my husband's vacation he had for the year, as well as PTO days. We think in total it was 29 days, plus 3 days paternity leave we stretched to 40 by only applying for time off on the days he was actually scheduled to work. At the time, the company only offered 3 days paid paternity leave. I don't recall how much they offered unpaid, or the total amount though. So we decided to just use the paid days since my parents were close by. As for why we put up with the calls coming in for so long, simply put, we were both exhausted, and as much as we wanted him to stop calling, we didn't want to offend him since neither of us knew how long he'd be there. We had expected him to be gone in 3 months, like most of the other rotating cast of store management had been, so when he stayed longer than that, we decided it was just easier to just deal with him long enough to enforce a boundary. Relevant comments. I had a manager like that. When my uncle died, I found out about it on the way to work. I told the manager I could work that night and the rest of the week, but I'd need the weekend off to help my family. That Saturday morning, he calls me to ask if I'll be working that night. I said no, BC of our previous conversation, and that I had plenty of leave, so it shouldn't be an issue. He calls me back maybe an hour later and tells me I can't have the weekend off because someone was out due to COVID. No one else would cover, and bereavement leave didn't cover uncles, which he was correct about, unfortunately. I wound up working that entire weekend on short rest due to being up helping my elderly aunt and having to work nights. That Monday I filed a complaint with his boss over this and a few dozen other issues I'd seen, but never said anything about, because it didn't affect me. The next day he was placed on leave so they could investigate my complaints, and by the next Monday he was fired. People like my and your husband's managers can all go eat a bag of dicks.